All right, so ready to dive into some of these tips on how to make meetings way less of a chore.
Let's do it.
You sent over a ton of interesting stuff on making meetings more productive, and I have to say, I'm pretty excited to dig into these 5 tips with you.
Yeah, it's actually kind of wild how much research goes into this whole world of meetings, right? Like it really shows you how much they really impact our work lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the very first tip we're going to unpack here. Having a crystal clear agenda. You even mentioned in your notes that a clear agenda is like the number one thing, the biggest predictor of whether a meeting will actually be successful or not. It's like the MVP of meetings, wouldn't you say?
It totally is. And I think the reason for that really comes down to getting everyone on the same page right from the start. Like, remember that article on time management you shared?
Yeah.
It mentioned that agendas that have super clear outcomes can actually speed up decision making, sometimes even by like 30%. It's like giving everyone a roadmap so nobody gets lost along the way.
Oh, I love that. A roadmap for your meeting. Okay, so you've got your roadmap, the agenda's all set, but then bam, you get hit with one of those meeting invites, the ones with enough people to fill a whole stadium. That's got to be where your second tip comes into play, right?
Exactly. And this is where your notes about decision fatigue are so spot on because having too many people in the room, too many voices, can actually make it harder to get things done. I mean, have you ever felt that? Like you're stuck in a meeting where there are just way too many cooks in the kitchen.
Oh, all the time. And it's not just about the decisions either. You also talked about how important it is to respect everyone's time. That feeling of being trapped in a meeting that you didn't even need to be at. Ugh. The ultimate time suck, am I right?
Ugh, the worst. Right. And I think everyone's been there at some point. It just highlights how crucial it is to be really intentional about who's actually needed in the room to achieve the meeting's objective.
So true. Okay, so we've got a clear agenda. We've invited the right people. What's next?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Tip number 3 is all about staying focused. And I know, you're probably thinking, well, duh. But honestly, you'd be amazed at how many times a perfectly productive meeting gets totally derailed by going off on tangents.
It's like you almost can't help it, right? That one random thought that pops into your head, and suddenly you're miles away from where you were supposed to be.
Right. And speaking of staying on track, I feel like this is where that well-defined agenda we were talking about earlier really proves its worth, don't you think?
Totally. If you have that roadmap, it's so much easier to get back to where you need to be.
Exactly. And you know what's even better? Your research mentioned something called the parking lot method. It's super simple. Basically, whenever a tangent comes up, you just write it down in the parking lot like a list to come back to later. This way, the conversation stays focused, but you're not ignoring those other important points.
Oh, I like that. I'm stealing that one for sure. And it actually kind of reminds me of the next tip, which is all about making sure everyone in the meeting actually contributes.
Right. Because it's not enough to just have everyone in the room. They got to be engaged too.
Exactly.
Whether it's brainstorming, doing a round robin discussion, or just creating a safe space for people to share their thoughts openly. Getting everyone to participate is so essential. It's how you get those different perspectives and come up with truly innovative solutions.
It's about feeling heard, right? Having ownership over what's being discussed. And speaking of ownership, that brings us to the final tip, ending with actionable next steps.
Yes, this is where we shift from all that talking to actually getting stuff done. And your notes totally nailed it on this one. Clearly defined action items, each with a specific person responsible and a deadline, are so key to making sure everyone is accountable and that all that talk actually translates into real progress.
Love it. So, to sum it all up, we've got to nail that agenda, make sure we have the right people in the room, stay laser focused, get everyone involved, and end with a crystal clear plan of action. But before we wrap up, a final thought to leave you with. Your research mentioned something called the 15-minute rule. Have you ever thought about trying that out in your own meetings? It could be a total game changer for being more efficient.